For over 4 centuries, the world has worshipped the image of Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, a flawless icon of power and purity. But beneath the white lead and woven silk lies a corpse that tells a different, horrifying story. A story so dangerous that the British establishment has worked tirelessly to keep it locked away, in a tomb that must never, ever be opened. This is not a fairy tale of royal majesty. This is a forensic investigation into a lifetime of calculated suffering and a death shrouded in state secrets. We are about to journey into the darkest recesses of Tudor power, where a queen's body became both her greatest weapon and her most profound vulnerability, a territory to be defended with poison, pain, and perpetual lies. The year is 1603. The place, Richmond Palace. An unnatural silence has settled over the chambers of the aging monarch. For weeks, the air has carried a sweet, cloying stench of decay that no amount of lavender or burning rosemary can mask. Within her privy chamber, a bizarre and terrifying vigil is underway. Queen Elizabeth, 70 years old and ruler of England for 45, refuses to lie down. She is propped upright against a mountain of velvet cushions, her body a rigid, pained architecture of willpower. Her famous face, once the subject of poets, is now a cracked porcelain mask. The ceruse, the white lead paste, has dried and fissured, revealing glimpses of the angry, ulcerated skin beneath. Her eyes, clouded and distant, stare at phantoms only she can see. She speaks to her long-dead father, Henry VIII. She rails against the shadows of Spanish assassins. Her mind, the sharpest political instrument of its age, is unspooling in a fog of neurological decay and sheer, exhausted terror. What could make the most powerful woman in Christendom so afraid of her own bed? This grim tableau is the culmination of a life lived as a masterpiece of political theater. Every aspect of Elizabeth Tudor's existence, from her iconic appearance to her celebrated virginity, was a deliberate construction. But like any masterpiece, its creation demanded immense sacrifice. The canvas, in this case, was her own flesh. To understand the grotesque poetry of her final days, we must travel back to the primal trauma that forged her. We must go to the Tower of London in the spring of 1536. Here, a little girl, not yet 3 years old, plays in the gardens of the royal apartments. Her name is Elizabeth. She does not witness the event directly, but she feels its seismic shock. The whispers among the servants turn to stunned silence. The world suddenly feels colder, more fragile. Her mother in Bullen, vibrant, clever, revolutionary, and has been beheaded on the green within sight of the Tower walls on the orders of her father, the king. The lesson is not subtle. To be a woman who depends on a man's favor is to live with your neck upon the block. Love is not a sanctuary. It is the antechamber to the scaffold. This brutal equation was branded onto Elizabeth's psyche before she could even read. The subsequent parade of stepmothers provided a grim curriculum. Jane Seymour died in childbirth, a sacrifice to the dynasty. Anne of Cleves was rejected and discarded, but survived through shrewd negotiation. Catherine Howard, young and foolish, followed in Bullen to the block. Catherine Parr, the survivor, navigated the king's temper through intellect and caution. Young Elizabeth was a brilliant student. She learned to become a phantom, a creature of adaptability. When declared a bastard and sent from court, she smiled and curtsied, all while mentally cataloging every betrayer. She immersed herself in languages, philosophy, and statecraft, armoring her mind to compensate for the vulnerability of her sex. Her teenage imprisonment in the Tower in 1554, accused of treason by her half-sister Queen Mary, was the final, brutal examination. For 2 months, she lived in the very rooms where her mother had awaited death. The stress induced a genuine, debilitating illness, perhaps the first of many psychosomatic crises. She survived by perfecting the art of the performance, playing the obedient Catholic, the frail invalid, the harmless younger sister. She walked out of the Tower a different person. The girl had been killed. In her place stood a sovereign in waiting, her true self entombed beneath layers of impenetrable artifice. She emerged from the Tower not with her innocence, but with her first perfect mask. In 1558, upon Mary's death, the crown was hers. The coronation was a spectacle of golden cloth and roaring crowds. But as the heavy crown was placed upon her head, Elizabeth understood a terrifying truth. The throne did not make her safe. It merely made her the brightest target in Europe. The performance now had to be perpetual, and its primary stage was her own body. The immediate, deafening demand from her council, her parliament, and every foreign power was simple. Marry. Produce an heir. Secure the succession. A queen ruling alone was considered an unnatural, temporary aberration. Thus began the most elaborate diplomatic ballet of the 16th century. Elizabeth became the consummate tease of European royalty. Philip II of Spain, her sister's widower, offered a merger of empires and the extinction of English Protestantism. She strung him along for years, using the possibility of marriage as a diplomatic shield. The Archduke Charles of Austria was a Protestant alternative, but marriage meant entanglement in the bloody quagmire of continental wars. Negotiations dragged on until they dissolved into nothing. Eric XIV of Sweden sent flattering portraits. Elizabeth hung them in her gallery and laughed with her ladies. The Duke of Anjou, her frog, came closest, but his Catholicism proved an insurmountable barrier with her people. And then there was Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. This was the great, tragic love of her life. Their childhood bond had deepened into a profound, adult attachment. He was her emotional touchstone. The mysterious death of his wife, Amy Robsart, in 1560, found at the bottom of a staircase with a broken neck, tainted their relationship with the indelible stain of scandal. To marry him would have been political suicide, confirming every lurid rumor of adultery and murder that swirled through the courts of Europe. Elizabeth, the master of calculation, chose her crown over her heart. She kept him close, showered him with titles and affection, but never crossed the ultimate line. This refusal to marry has been endlessly analyzed as political genius, and it was. But what if it was also a grim necessity? What if the Virgin Queen was, in part, a medical reality she was forced to weaponize? We now enter the realm of the body's deepest secrets. Contemporary accounts from foreign ambassadors, trained observers paid to report every detail, are strikingly consistent in their perplexity. They noted her loud and manly voice, her tall, strong, almost masculine frame, her commanding bearing that seemed more soldier than court lady. The Spanish ambassador once wrote cryptically that her form is not as other women's, before being abruptly recalled. More compelling than these whispers are the chilling medical incidents. In 1562, Elizabeth fell gravely ill with what was called a violent fever. She believed she was dying. In extremis, she allowed her doctors a rare examination. One physician, Dr. Robert Wick, emerged from the royal bedchamber visibly pale and shaken. He refused to divulge what he had seen, even to his colleagues. He died unexpectedly less than a year later, the cause vaguely recorded. In 1568, another collapse during a council meeting led to a similar scene. Her ladies loosening her garments, one fainting dead away, the room being cleared in panic. No explanation was ever given. What anatomical truth did these witnesses glimpse that was so shocking it could not be spoken? What sight could silence a Tudor court, a place fluent in every dialect of intrigue? Modern historical medicine points to a compelling, if unprovable, theory: androgen insensitivity syndrome, AIS. A condition where a person with XY chromosomes develops externally as female due to an inability to respond to testosterone. Individuals with AIS are often tall, with a sturdy build, shallow or absent menstruation, and underdeveloped or absent internal reproductive structures. They are sterile. It is a theory that fits the puzzle. The ambiguous physical descriptions, the complete absence of any credible record of menstrual cycles, a fact often monitored in royal women, the absolute, non-negotiable childlessness, and the traumatic shock of her physicians. If true, it means Elizabeth carried from birth a secret that would have destroyed her legitimacy. Her very body was a treason against the state's need for an heir. Her entire reign, then, becomes a magnificent, decades-long act of misdirection, using the concept of virginity to hide a far more dangerous biological truth. Whether driven by this biological fate, the deep trauma of her mother's execution, or sheer political brilliance, her path was set. She would reign alone, but to do so, she had to transcend mortality. She had to become Gloriana, the ageless goddess queen. This transformation required daily, toxic alchemy. The foundation of the icon was her skin, that legendary, poreless alabaster complexion. It was achieved with Venetian ceruse, a paste of white lead and vinegar. For over 40 years, this mixture was applied in layers every morning. Lead is a potent neurotoxin. It does not sit on the skin. It absorbs through it, entering the bloodstream, accumulating in the bones and organs, and attacking the nervous system. Elizabeth was slowly, systematically poisoning herself. The symptoms of chronic lead poisoning map precisely onto her documented health struggles. The debilitating stomach cramps that left her unable to eat, the violent migraines that forced her into darkened rooms, the weakness and pain in her joints that made stairs a trial, the infamous temper and wild mood swings, the insomnia, the memory lapses of her later years, and the progressive peripheral neuropathy that likely caused the tremors in her hands. Each public appearance demanded a fresh application, trapping the poison beneath. As the lead corroded her skin, causing dryness, lesions, and eventually necrosis, tissue death, the makeup had to be applied thicker to cover the damage, which in turn worsened the corrosion. It was a horrifying, inescapable cycle. Her face, the empire's most famous landmark, was a monument built with poison mortar. Her second physical prison was structural, the Tudor bodice and corset. Fashion demanded an inhuman silhouette, a conical, rigid torso, a flat chest, a wasp waist. Elizabeth's garments were reinforced with wood, whalebone, and even steel, laced with a severity that bordered on torture. This was not vanity, it was architecture. The corset was her exoskeleton, holding her upright during interminable ceremonies, carving her body into an icon of impregnable authority. The physiological cost was immense. Over decades, her rib cage deformed, bending inward. Her lungs were compressed, leading to shallow breathing. Her liver and digestive organs were displaced, contributing to her chronic pain. Autopsies of noble women from the period show exactly this damage: cracked ribs, misshapen organs, spinal curvatures. Upon Elizabeth's death, the corset's boning had left permanent, deep indentations in her flesh, a fossilized record of her constraint. The political pressures never ceased, each one exacting a physical toll. The presence of her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, a beautiful, fertile Catholic heir, was a live nerve in English politics for nearly 20 years. Every Catholic plot to assassinate Elizabeth aimed to place Mary on the throne. Finally, after the Babington plot provided incontrovertible evidence of Mary's complicity, Elizabeth signed the death warrant in 1587. The execution of an anointed sovereign was a catastrophic breach of divine right, and it haunted Elizabeth. She fell into a profound depression, refusing food and company. The stress likely triggered a severe flare-up of her chronic illnesses. This was followed immediately by the gravest external threat, the Spanish Armada in 1588. As the colossal fleet approached, Elizabeth's role was to embody defiant courage. Her legendary speech at Tilbury, where she declared she had the heart and stomach of a king, was the pinnacle of her performance. What the legend omits is the frail human engine behind the icon. She was so weak from illness and pain that she required assistance to mount her horse. She was likely fortified with wine and herbal stimulants. For 3 hours, through sheer will, she projected invincibility. The moment she returned to privacy, she collapsed. She was incapacitated for a week, suffering what may have been internal bleeding or a systemic crisis. Her body had paid the price for the nation's morale. The final decade of her reign was a long, painful denouement. Robert Dudley's death in 1588 shattered her emotionally. She locked herself away, wearing his last letter around her neck like a relic. She then fixated on a much younger favorite, Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, Dudley's stepson. Handsome and reckless, Essex symbolized a fading connection to youth and passion. His arrogance and military failures strained her patience. The final breach came in a moment of devastating intimacy. He once burst into her private chamber unannounced and saw her without her wig and makeup, her face raw and aged. He had seen the truth behind the mask. She never forgave him. His subsequent bungled coup attempt in 1601 forced her to sign his execution warrant, another traumatic severance. After Essex's death, a deep melancholia settled over her, a withdrawal from the world. Physically, the decay accelerated. The lead poisoning had ravaged her hairline, necessitating elaborate, heavy wigs. Her teeth, rotten from sugar and neglect, fell out, forcing her to stuff her cheeks with cloth to maintain her facial shape, which muffled her famed oratory. The tremors in her hands worsened. A persistent, unsettling odor of decay began to cling to her, a smell noted by several courtiers despite vast quantities of perfume. This may have been from necrotic facial tissue, an internal abscess, or failing organs. By the winter of 1602 to 1603, the end was undeniable. She stopped applying her ceruse makeup. "I am past caring what they see," she reportedly said. She stopped eating, her throat likely swollen and painful. Most hauntingly, she developed a profound ascites, a massive swelling of her abdomen with fluid due to liver or heart failure. For the world's virgin queen, this presented a cruel, grotesque parody of pregnancy. And she refused to lie down. For days, then weeks, she remained propped up, sleeping in chairs, supported by her devoted and exhausted ladies. To lie down was to surrender, to acknowledge the body's final defeat. It may also have been a physical necessity, as the fluid in her abdomen would have made breathing impossible in a reclined position. Her counselors, in a panic over the unresolved succession, crowded around her. She delayed naming an heir until the very last, perhaps superstitiously believing it would hasten her death, or politically understanding that to do so would transfer power away from her. Finally, through a gesture, a nod, a hand movement, she indicated James VI of Scotland, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. The poetic irony was complete. Her successor was the child of a rival she had been forced to execute. Only then did she allow herself to be carried to her bed. She fell into a silent stupor and died in the early hours of March 24, 1603. The great performance was over. Then the second act began, the cover-up. The doors to the death chamber were sealed. Only a select few were allowed inside. What they encountered as they prepared the royal body for embalming sent waves of shock and horror through the room. As they removed the layers of clothing, the physical toll of her reign was laid bare. The corset had to be cut away, revealing torso indented with deep, purple grooves, a map of decades of constriction. The removal of the ceruse was worse. In places, it pulled away strips of ulcerated, blackened skin from her face and neck, revealing the necrotic damage beneath. The smell of advanced decay was overpowering. Most critically, those attending to the most intimate aspects of the preparation glimpsed anatomical anomalies that were not right, as one later account hinted, ambiguities or absences that were deeply confusing and frightening. The evidence was too dangerous. Orders were given with urgent haste. The body was embalmed and then sealed within a lead coffin with unprecedented speed, long before the normal preparations would be complete. This was not just preservation, it was containment. Key witnesses, servants, lesser ladies, were pensioned off and sent far from London. The official narrative of a peaceful, pious end was crafted and disseminated. Her funeral was a spectacular pageant of grief, celebrating the myth of Gloriana. The corpse inside the lead shell, however, was that of a woman who had been chemically poisoned, physically deformed, and possibly biologically intersex. The state could not allow these truths to survive her. They buried the queen's body, but only after first burying the truth of what it contained. For over 400 years, this silence has been rigorously enforced. While the remains of other English monarchs, Richard III, Charles I, even her father Henry VIII, have been examined, studied, and debated, Elizabeth I's tomb in Westminster Abbey remains inviolate. Every formal request from historians, scientists, and medical researchers has been met with a firm, unequivocal denial from the Dean and Chapter of Westminster. The reason given is always respect for the dead. But the selective nature of this respect is telling. The truth is that Elizabeth's body is the ultimate state secret. To confirm the lead poisoning would be to expose the grotesque cost of her iconography. To confirm a condition like AIS would be to rewrite the foundational myth of the Virgin Queen, unraveling a core narrative of British history and monarchy. The symbol is more valuable than the human truth. What does a nation owe to the truth of a ruler's body, when that truth threatens the legend that built the nation? The story of Elizabeth I is, therefore, a profound and unsettling paradox. She is celebrated as one of history's most powerful women, a sovereign who wielded absolute authority. Yet, that authority was built upon the systematic destruction of her physical self. Her power was predicated on her ability to perform an impossible ideal, ageless, sexless, invulnerable, and the performance required her to ingest poison, deform her skeleton, and hide her fundamental biology. She traded a human life for a legendary afterlife. In the end, the greatest victory of the Elizabethan state was not over the Spanish Armada, but over the inconvenient facts of the Queen's own flesh. They enshrined the icon and entombed the evidence. The tomb in Westminster Abbey is not just a resting place. It is a locked archive, a monument to the fact that sometimes history is not what happened, but what the powerful need us to believe happened. If this journey into the shadows behind the gilded portrait has held your attention, if you believe the human truth behind the legend deserves to be heard, please give this video a like. It empowers Winds of Thought to continue our mission, excavating the buried realities that shape our understanding of power, sacrifice, and the stories we choose to tell about ourselves.